You know what's sitting in most people's freezers right now? Something that could be quietly making their blood pressure worse, their joints stiffer, and their energy lower. And they have no idea. I didn't either, until I started paying closer attention to what I was actually eating day after day. Today we're going to talk about frozen food, because at our age, frozen food can be a lifesaver. It's convenient, it lasts. It means we don't have to run to the grocery store every single day. But here's the thing, not all frozen food is created equal. Some of it is genuinely good for us, and some of it is doing us real harm, even when it looks perfectly harmless sitting there in that little cardboard box. I'm Grace. I'm 91 years old, and I still live on my own. I cook my own meals. I manage my own health. And I've learned a thing or two along the way about what helps and what hurts, especially when it comes to what we're putting in our bodies. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which 4 frozen foods to stop buying and which 4 to start keeping in your freezer every single week. Simple as that. And stick with me, because near the end, I'm going to share the one thing most people over 70 get completely wrong about frozen food versus fresh food. It surprised me when I learned it, and I think it'll surprise you too. Let's get into it. Avoid number 1, frozen meals with more than 600 milligrams of sodium. I want you to think about the last time you ate one of those frozen dinner trays. You know the ones. They come in a little divided tray, usually with something like chicken, mashed potatoes, and a side of corn. They heat up in 4 minutes. They smell pretty good, and they're only a few dollars. I used to eat those sometimes, thought I was doing fine. Then I started reading the labels, and I was shocked. Some of those small frozen dinners, and I mean small, not even a very filling portion, contain over 1,000 milligrams of sodium. In one meal, just one. Now here's why that matters for us specifically. Our kidneys, as we get older, don't filter sodium out of our bodies as efficiently as they used to. That's just a normal part of aging, so when we take in too much salt, it tends to stay in our system longer. It pulls water into our bloodstream, and that raises blood pressure. High blood pressure is already one of the most common health concerns for people our age, and too much sodium makes it harder to manage, even if you're taking medication for it. The American Heart Association recommends no more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day for most adults. Ideally, for older adults, they suggest even less, closer to 1,500 milligrams. So if one frozen dinner is giving you 1,000 to 1,400 milligrams in a single sitting, that doesn't leave much room for anything else you eat that day. Here's what I do now. I still buy frozen meals sometimes. I won't pretend I don't, but I always flip the box over and look at the sodium number before it goes in my cart. I look for anything under 600 milligrams per serving, and I make sure to check that the serving size on the label matches how much I'm actually going to eat. Sometimes companies list a serving as half the tray, which can be a little sneaky. Some good brands have started making lower sodium options. They're out there. You just have to look for them. And here's a small win. Even just doing this one check, looking at that sodium number, can make a real difference over time. You don't have to change everything at once. Start there. Now, the second thing to avoid is something I think a lot of people don't realize is a problem at all. Avoid number 2, frozen breaded and fried foods, frozen mozzarella sticks, frozen fried chicken, frozen onion rings, frozen fish sticks coated in thick breading. These things are everywhere in the freezer aisle, and they're easy to make, and they taste good, I won't lie. But here's what's happening inside that breading. Most of these products are pre-fried before they're frozen. That means they've already been cooked in oil, often partially hydrogenated oils, or oils high in what we call omega-6 fatty acids. Then, when you cook them again at home, in the oven or in the air fryer, they go through a second round of heating. That process creates a lot of what researchers call inflammatory compounds. Now, inflammation is a word you hear a lot these days. Let me explain what it means in simple terms. Inflammation is your body's way of fighting off harm. Short-term inflammation, like when you cut your finger and it gets a little red and swollen, that's your body working properly. That's a good thing. But chronic inflammation, meaning low-grade inflammation that's always simmering in the background, that's a different story. It's been linked to joint pain and stiffness, to heart disease, to cognitive decline. And as we age, our bodies already tend to carry more of this background inflammation than we did when we were young. The last thing we want to do is feed it. Regularly eating foods high in unhealthy fats and heavily processed ingredients does exactly that. Now, I'm not saying you can never have a fish stick in your life again. That's not realistic. But if breaded, fried, frozen foods are showing up on your plate several times a week, that's worth rethinking. What can you have instead? Frozen fish that isn't breaded, plain frozen salmon, tilapia, or cod is a wonderful alternative. And I'll tell you more about that in just a few minutes, because fish actually makes it onto our list of things to eat every day. Let's move on to number 3. Avoid number 3, frozen breakfast. Pastries, waffles, and sweet breakfast items. This one might sting a little because a warm toaster waffle or a frozen breakfast pastry can feel like such a nice, easy start to the morning. But here's what's in most of them. Refined white flour, which is essentially sugar in the way your body processes it. Added sugar on top of that. And very little fiber or protein to slow any of that down. When we eat a meal like that, all quick carbohydrates, very little fiber, very little protein, our blood sugar rises very quickly. Then it drops again, often just as fast. And that cycle, repeated day after day, puts a real strain on the body. For people who have type 2 diabetes or who are pre-diabetic, this is especially important. Blood sugar swings are something we really want to minimize, but honestly, even for people without diabetes, this kind of breakfast pattern leads to that mid-morning crash, where you feel tired, a little foggy, maybe a bit hungry again, even though you just ate. I used to think I was just a morning person who slowed down by 10 o'clock. Turns out it was what I was eating. Changing breakfast made a genuine difference for me. More protein in the morning, eggs or Greek yogurt, or even a small handful of nuts alongside whatever else I'm having, and that foggy mid-morning feeling mostly went away. Now I know some mornings you just want something fast and easy. I completely understand. So here's a small suggestion. If you do want something quick from the freezer in the morning, look for frozen options that are higher in protein and fiber. Some stores carry frozen egg muffins or egg bites. Little egg-based cups that heat up in 2 minutes and actually give you something sustaining to start the day with. We'll talk more about good frozen breakfast choices in a bit. Coming up next, number 4 on our avoid list. And this one surprised me more than any of the others. Avoid number 4, frozen pot pies and cream-based frozen entrees. There's something about a chicken pot pie that just feels like comfort, especially on a cool evening. And I understand the appeal completely, but a standard frozen pot pie is one of the most calorie-dense, saturated fat-heavy, high-sodium options in the entire freezer section. Let me give you a sense of what I mean. A single frozen chicken pot pie, just one, can contain anywhere from 700 to over 900 calories. It can have 35 or more grams of fat, much of it saturated, and the sodium content is often well over 1,000 milligrams. Now, calories by themselves aren't the enemy. We need energy. But for many of us who are less physically active than we used to be, and whose metabolism has naturally slowed with age, taking in that much saturated fat in one meal is hard on the cardiovascular system. Saturated fat, the kind found in fatty meats, butter, full-fat dairy, and those creamy frozen entrees, tends to raise LDL cholesterol. That's the type of cholesterol associated with plaque building up in the arteries. And arteries that are narrowed or stiffened make everything harder for the heart. The same concern applies to those creamy pasta dishes. Frozen fettuccine alfredo, macaroni and cheese, creamed spinach entrees. They are rich, they taste good, but they are carrying a heavy load of saturated fat and sodium. Here's my workaround. If I'm craving something warm and comforting on a cold evening, which I absolutely do, I'll heat up a bowl of frozen vegetable soup. Or I'll take some plain frozen vegetables and add them to a simple broth on the stove. It only takes a few minutes. And I get that warmth and comfort without all the saturated fat. All right, that's our 4 foods to avoid. Let's take a little breath here. Eat every day, number 1, frozen vegetables, especially these specific ones. Here is the truth that changed the way I shop, and it is backed by solid nutritional science. Frozen vegetables are often more nutritious than the fresh ones sitting in the produce section. I know, that surprised me too. Here's why it's true. When vegetables are picked for freezing, they're frozen very quickly, often within hours of being harvested, right at peak ripeness. That flash freezing locks in the vitamins and the minerals. Fresh vegetables, on the other hand, often travel for days or weeks to reach the store. Then they sit in the display, then we bring them home, and maybe they sit in the crisper drawer for a few more days. By the time we eat them, some of the nutritional value has faded. Of course, vegetables from your own garden, eaten the same day, that's ideal. But most of us aren't gardening at that scale, so frozen is genuinely a wonderful option. Now, which frozen vegetables are especially good for us as we get older? Spinach and other dark leafy greens. These are rich in magnesium, which supports muscle and nerve function, and vitamin K, which is important for bone health. Just be aware that if you're on blood thinners like warfarin, vitamin K can interact with your medication. So check with your doctor about how much is right for you. Broccoli. This is one I keep in my freezer at all times. It's high in vitamin C, which supports immune function. It has fiber, which helps digestion, and it contains compounds called antioxidants, which help protect our cells from damage. Edamame, those little green soybeans, high in plant-based protein. Good for people who are trying to get enough protein without always relying on meat. Sweet peas, easy to add to almost anything. Gentle on digestion, and children love them if you have grandchildren visiting. And butternut squash, rich in vitamin A and potassium, and naturally a little sweet, so it doesn't need much seasoning. Here's my simple approach. I buy 2 or 3 bags of different frozen vegetables each week. Every day, at least one meal includes some of them. I steam them, or I add them to soups, or I toss them into eggs in the morning. It takes almost no effort, and I feel better for it. That's your small win for this section. Just 2 or 3 bags of frozen vegetables in the cart next shopping trip. That's all. Let's move to number 2. Eat every day. Number 2, frozen wild-caught fish. Let's pause for a moment, because I want to tell you something about myself. I grew up eating a lot of fish. My mother cooked it at least twice a week. Back then, I thought it was just something we ate because it was affordable. I didn't understand it was one of the best things she could have been feeding us. Now I understand. Fish, especially fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, and trout, is one of the richest natural sources of omega-3 fatty acids. And omega-3s are remarkable things for the aging body. They help reduce that background inflammation we talked about earlier. They support heart health. There's growing evidence that they help protect brain function as we age. They support joint comfort. And they provide high-quality protein, which is something we genuinely need more of as we get older. Because our bodies become less efficient at using the protein we eat, so we need to be more intentional about getting enough. The good news is that frozen fish is often an excellent choice. Wild-caught frozen salmon, frozen tilapia, frozen cod. These are all readily available at most grocery stores, usually very affordable, and they thaw quickly in the refrigerator overnight. What I look for: plain frozen fish fillets, no breading, no sauce, just the fish. Then I season it myself at home. A little olive oil, lemon, herbs, and bake it. Simple. Takes about 20 minutes in the oven. Aim for fish at least 2 or 3 times per week. Some research suggests even more is beneficial. If you have concerns about mercury, which some fish can contain, salmon, tilapia, cod, and trout are all considered lower mercury options and generally safe to eat regularly. But again, your doctor is the best person to guide you based on your specific health picture. Now, ready for number 3? Because this one might be the most underrated item in the entire freezer aisle. Eat every day. Number 3, frozen berries. If I had to pick one frozen food that I think gives us the most benefit for the least effort, it would be frozen berries, without question. Blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, blackberries. These little fruits are absolutely packed with what scientists call antioxidants, specifically a group called polyphenols and flavonoids. Those are big words, but here's what they mean in plain language. Our cells, as we age, are exposed to ongoing damage from things called free radicals. Free radicals are unstable molecules that come from normal body processes, but also from things like pollution, sun exposure, and stress. Over time, this cellular damage builds up, and it's linked to the aging process and to diseases like cancer, heart disease, and dementia. Antioxidants essentially neutralize these free radicals. They protect our cells. And berries, especially blueberries, are among the most antioxidant-rich foods we know of. But here's what I find particularly exciting. As someone in my 90s who cares very much about staying sharp, there's a growing body of research specifically looking at berries and brain health. Multiple studies have found that regular consumption of blueberries is associated with slower cognitive decline in older adults. Some studies suggest it may improve memory and processing speed. Now, eating blueberries is not a cure for dementia. I want to be clear about that. But as a simple, inexpensive, enjoyable habit that may support brain health, that's a pretty wonderful thing to add to your day. And frozen berries are just as nutritious as fresh ones. For exactly the same reason I mentioned with vegetables. They're frozen at peak ripeness, which locks in those nutrients beautifully. Here's how I use them every day. Every morning, I add a handful of frozen berries to my yogurt or my oatmeal. I don't even thaw them. I just put them in. And within a few minutes, they're soft. Alternatively, I blend them into a simple smoothie. Half a cup of berries, some yogurt, a splash of milk, done in 2 minutes. One more thing about berries. They're naturally sweet. So for anyone managing blood sugar, they're a much smarter choice than other sweet foods because they come bundled with fiber that slows how quickly the sugar enters your bloodstream. A small bag of frozen berries costs just a few dollars and lasts for weeks. That's real value. Let's do our 4th and final eat everyday food now. And then I have a promise to keep. That surprise about frozen food versus fresh that I mentioned at the very beginning. Eat every day, number 4, frozen legumes, especially edamame and frozen beans. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Grace, beans, really? Stay with me for just a moment, because this one is worth understanding. As we get older, 2 things become especially important for our bodies: protein and fiber. Protein is what our muscles are made of. And from about our 50s onward, we naturally begin to lose muscle mass, a process called sarcopenia. We can slow this down with movement and exercise, yes. But nutrition plays an enormous role too. Getting enough protein every day is essential for maintaining the muscle strength that keeps us stable on our feet, able to carry our groceries, able to get up from a chair without struggle. Most health guidelines suggest older adults aim for about 1.0 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. If that sounds complicated, don't worry. For most of us, it simply means making sure we have a good protein source at each meal. Fiber is the other piece. Fiber keeps our digestive system moving, which becomes more important as we age because digestion naturally slows down. Fiber also helps manage cholesterol. It helps regulate blood sugar, and it feeds the good bacteria in our gut, which affects everything from our immune system to our mood. Most older Americans are not getting enough of either protein or fiber. Frozen legumes are one of the simplest ways to boost both at once. Frozen edamame, you can buy it shelled, so there's no fuss, contains about 17 grams of protein per cup, along with good fiber. Frozen black beans, kidney beans, and chickpeas that you buy in those pouches and can microwave in minutes. These are all high in fiber and plant protein. Here's what I do. I keep frozen edamame in my freezer at all times. I heat up a small bowl for a snack in the afternoon. Or I add black beans to a simple bowl of rice and frozen vegetables for an easy dinner that takes about 10 minutes to put together. If you've never thought of beans as a freezer staple before, I hope I've convinced you now. I promised you something at the start, and I keep my promises. The one thing most people over 70 get wrong about frozen food. Here it is. Most people assume that fresh is always better than frozen. They feel a little guilty about buying frozen food, like they're cutting corners or not taking good enough care of themselves. And they may even pass by perfectly good frozen vegetables and fish, because somehow the fresh version feels more virtuous. But here's what the science actually tells us. Nutritionally speaking, frozen vegetables and frozen fish very often match or exceed the nutritional value of their fresh counterparts at the grocery store. As I mentioned earlier, the freezing process locks in nutrients at peak ripeness. Meanwhile, fresh produce loses vitamins, particularly vitamin C and folate, during transport and storage. Studies have measured this directly. In some cases, frozen broccoli has been found to have higher vitamin C content than fresh broccoli that's been sitting in a refrigerated display case for several days. The guilt about frozen food is misplaced. Now, this doesn't mean fresh food is bad. Not at all. Fresh food from a local farmer's market, eaten the same day it's picked, that's wonderful. Fresh is great when it's truly fresh. But frozen food from a good brand, chosen wisely, that is genuinely good nutrition. And for many of us, especially those of us who are cooking for one, or who have limited energy, or who don't have easy access to a grocery store every few days, frozen food isn't a compromise. It's a smart, practical, healthy choice. Stop feeling guilty about it. Start choosing the right things. That's the whole game. Let's do a quick recap together. Let's go through everything we covered today, nice and simple. 4 foods to avoid. High sodium frozen meals. Check that label and aim for under 600 milligrams. Breaded and fried frozen foods. They create inflammation that's hard on your joints and heart. Frozen breakfast pastries and sugary waffles. They spike your blood sugar and leave you tired. And frozen pot pies and creamy entrees. Too much saturated fat and sodium for our hearts to handle comfortably. Now the 4 to keep in your freezer every week. Frozen vegetables like spinach, broccoli, and butternut squash, just as nutritious as fresh and so easy to prepare. Frozen wild-caught fish, full of omega-3s that fight inflammation and keep your heart and brain healthy. Frozen berries, add a handful to breakfast every morning and you're feeding your brain and protecting your cells. And frozen legumes, edamame, black beans, chickpeas, protein and fiber in one simple food. Here's the truth I want to leave you with. Living well at this age doesn't require anything dramatic. It's the small, steady choices that add up. What goes in your freezer is one of those choices. It costs very little. It takes very little effort. And it matters more than most people realize. You don't have to change everything at once. Just pick one thing from today and start there. That's enough. Every step you take toward caring for yourself is an act of love, for you and for everyone who wants you around. Thank you for being here with me today. Leave a comment, share this with a friend, and come back for the next video. We're talking about how to get enough proteins as we age. I'll see you then.